Hey everybody, Chris here. I wanted to take some time and do a review for this product that I've been kind of playing around with for probably about 4 or 5 months. This is called an ATLI EON, and what it is it's a little time-lapse camera. It's shaped kind of like a GoPro or your typical action camera, but this thing is heavily geared towards time-lapse photography, not something that you would really want to attach to the beginning front of your kayak, but there's a lot of things you can do with these. I first saw them advertised on Instagram and I started looking into it because it mentioned a 4-day battery life, and then it just immediately caught my attention. I took a look at it, looked through all the options or capabilities of it, and then saw it was only $200, and I thought, I can't pass this up. Of course I'm going to get one of these things. So now, fast forward to now, I've got 11 of these things and I use them all the time, and I kind of want to show you what I do with them and how useful they are. But first, let's take a little time and go over the system and really take a look and see what this is. When you first open the box, you'll immediately notice there's no weather sealing on this camera. However, it does come with a pretty well-fitting rubber housing for the camera and the lens, complete with a UV filter that's built into the hood to offer even more protection. While this is not your standard type of weather sealing found in other action cameras, it does a fairly good job of allowing the camera to film in the elements. I have one outdoors that's been filming my workshop for well over a month, and in Colorado this time of year, that means temperatures between 95 and 30 with sun, rain, sleet. No snow just yet, but so far it's handled all the elements, and this time outdoors flawlessly. Like traditional action cameras this size, this also writes to micro SD. The largest that I put in one was 256 gig, and it was able to read and write to it. I didn't fill the entire thing up, though. It felt crazy to have that much space in it because this doesn't really make huge files. So you've got two different ways that you can record this when you're doing time lapse. One is just to have it put together a 1080p time lapse video, and understand, no, there's no 4K on this, but when you look at a lot of the other things this thing does and the price point, I think it's well worth it. You can do the 1080p file, or you can do the 1080p file and a folder full of all the individual JPEGs. Now that also stretches it out a little bit to, I think, 2600 pixels across. So it's actually 2.6K instead of 1080p. So you can get the little bit of extra resolution there. And you can also massage and work those files individually through whatever program you want to use, and then stitch it together, and you might be able to clean it up a little bit. For the sake of my own personal time and just to show how all this stuff actually works, none of the videos that I'm going to show from this are going to have anything done by me. They're just going to be straight out of camera. So as I mentioned earlier, the battery life on this thing is just incredible. One of the problems with a lot of action cameras is that they have very short battery life. In order to get that tiny little camera to do everything that it needs to do, there's a lot of processing that goes in there, and then they have the display and all the other stuff going on that they only get maybe about half hour worth of time out of them, depending on the camera. So this is pretty impressive because they advertise this will go 4 days. Now, I have actually managed to get it to go 5 days. And what I was doing, I was filming every 30 minutes. It would take an image from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And I had it scheduled so it wasn't taking images during the dark. And it went almost a full 5 days before it shut off due to a lack of battery. Part of the reason they're able to do this is because there is no display on this, and there's only one button and then two LEDs. There is no autofocus or anything like that. So being so manual, they're able to save a lot of those processes and functions and just get rid of them in order to reduce the amount of power that's consumed. And then with put it on a schedule, they don't have to have the sensor active all the time. So it really can just last darn near forever. And if you really need to, you can always pick up a little solar panel like this. I got this off Amazon, and it's got a little USB. And you can take a USB cable connector from here to the USB-C port in here, and then you can put it out there and just put it on a little rig and put this over the camera to give it a little extra protection from the elements, and it'll just film forever. However, the only thing you have to watch out for is it only does have about 4 days worth of battery, is what they say. So if you put this out somewhere and it snows on it and it's overcast for 5 days and that snow doesn't melt off, this thing will shut off and it will not turn back on its own. That would be something to be a really cool feature, is an auto start to where it immediately goes with the last savings or the last settings. But the fact, if you live in a more temperate environment or something where you're not worried about snowstorms, you can put one of these things out and it will just run indefinitely. Now, as I mentioned, this does not have autofocus. In fact, you have to rotate the entire lens in order to establish the focus. They make it really easy by giving you a zoom in option on the app in a small area in order to magnify it and see if your focus is where you want it. Generally, it's not too hard to get it. The focus ring is nice. It feels good. It doesn't feel loose. You know when you set it somewhere, it's not going to accidentally move. But there's also a detent on there that tells you when you're at that pretty much infinity mark. And then you can also bring it back to where you're filming maybe a few inches away from the screen or away from the lens. So you can really kind of fill the frame with really small things. Now, it does have its limitations. It's not like a full macro, but it's still pretty cool in how close you can get. And also something else to note about the lens hood. You can fold it back, but you can also stick it out. And if you need to use that in order to kind of protect from anything. But if you're going to be filming something that's in the glass, you can also just push it right up against the glass. And you can even push it in to where it sits at an angle and stuff like that, so you're not going to get any reflections. So that's a pretty cool feature. So a lot of the work that I do involves plants. A lot of studio-based time-lapse photography with plants. And one of the first things you have to figure out how to do with this kind of work is you have to be able to automate a grow light and the fill lights and pretty much everything else too. But the lighting is really important to get figured out quick. If you're just going to put a flower in front of a camera and film it blooming, you really don't need to do much. But if you want to take it to another level or film the actual growth of things that takes weeks and months, you have to be able to give it the day-night cycles, and you have to use a different light source for growing the plants as you do for filming them. At least you're going to want to, because you're not going to want that big overhead light source all the time. Sometimes you're going to want to illuminate the plants from behind, and if you put the grow light behind, all the plants will reach out towards the behind. So that doesn't work either. So what you got to do is you actually have to have the two different lighting systems. And then you have to coordinate it and control it. Well, one of the things that I thought was interesting on here is I saw a little trigger, and I thought, okay, this is going to be a remote shutter release, right? So I can tie this in with one of my robots and trigger it. But it's actually not. It's the opposite. That is a trigger. So what it does is 3 seconds before this thing meters to take an image, it'll actually short the pins on a cable that gets plugged in there. You can use that as a trigger in order to automate things. So I like to build stuff, so I made my own little ATLI grow box triggers. So what I have here is 2 relays, one that I plug the fill light in and one that I plug the grow light in. Well, I don't have to, there's a little bit more wiring than that, but I'll use it to control an outlet. And then I'll plug it into the side of the camera. Just like that. Once that's there, and I have all the lighting set up, when I'm setting it up, when I'm not recording, it automatically turns off the grow light and turns on the fill light. It's great. So you can frame the scene, get it all done and ready to go. Once you start filming, it reverses that and keeps the grow light on and turns off the fill light. And then 3 seconds before it takes an image, it'll kill the grow light, turn on the fill light, meter the scene, expose, and then turn the fill light back off and the grow light back on. And then I'll just use a mechanical timer on the outlet that I wire this to give a day-night schedule, and bam! This thing controls everything. It's so easy to use in that regard too. So up there, I've got 4 ATLIs that are doing this right now. And I'm getting ready to build 4 more shooting stations because the idea of having these little cameras on little arms and these little bays, I can just put things in there and just film like crazy. And it gives me opportunity to study plants. It gives me an opportunity to try really weird things so I don't have to use my larger rigs or my nicer cameras. It just gives me an opportunity to play around and kind of see what's going to work and what isn't, and then I can bring that into the studio afterwards. And while I'm doing it, I still get a lot of really cool footage off of this. And while yes, once again, it's only 1080p, it's still great for social media and things like that. So that is definitely one of my favorite features on this camera. And while this next thing might not seem like a really big deal, I gotta say something. I absolutely love the tripod on this thing. I mean, if you look, it's just got these 3 little legs. You can use it for a handle if you want. It's got a little pan tilt on it, and you release it. It's nice and loose, but you snug it just a little bit, and it holds just fine. And in fact, it holds so well, even at the lighter grab or at the lighter tension, that it's really easy just to push it and position it anywhere you want. And there's no kind of bounce back or anything, and you don't have to like re-crank it down. Like, sometimes with a larger setup on a ball head, you have to sit there and mess with it trying to get it exactly where you want it. This just actually works really well. And, you know, a lot of these things right now, I have a lot of these cameras on arms up in that little studio. So I got all these little tripods around. I've been putting loom cubes on them and everything. So the fact you get this little tripod is actually pretty gnarly, and I'm really excited that it's there. So let's talk about control. I hate apps. I don't like app driven cameras. I don't like app driven time lapse equipment. I don't like app driven long term camera rigs. I don't like app driven motion control systems. I don't like app driven shit in general when it comes to this industry. I just don't. It's like there's this feeling that we need to put an app out because people want their apps and you got to have your apps. But now I'm kind of at the mercy of some things. And one of them is having good control or good connection with my phone. Two, I have to have battery, so it's going to suck down more battery on my phone. So that's kind of a pain. But the big thing is really just if a company doesn't properly run itself and it goes under, those thousands of dollars worth of equipment that you bought, it's on a limited life now. So, you know, if you have a company, so say you manufacture a bunch of motion control equipment and then you sell it and then you have this app and this app is supposed to hold a whole lot of the features that you like. The company goes out of business. How many iOS or Android updates do you think you're going to go through before you find that you have to keep an old, unupdated device just to connect to it? Because eventually it's going to break. And if you don't have the developers of the app and the people who are supporting it to continue to make sure that it works, well, then you're just kind of done. So I don't like app-based stuff at all. This is app-based, and for this, it really is a necessity because in order to get that battery life out there, they had to get away from having onboard controls in order to save that battery space, okay? So the app on this one is actually not horrible. So far, it generally seems to log in pretty good. But it also has a couple parts to it that I think are pretty fantastic, to be honest. Like one, I've got 11 of these cameras now, and all of them show up on my ATLI app. And I can scroll through and see which ones are online. Anytime I'm using a camera that is going to be plugged in, it's not going to be on power saving mode. So it's going to stay connected to my home network because I have them all connected on there. And then with my phone connected to my home network, I can just browse through all the cameras that are up and active. And I can see what they have on them. I can review the footage. I can download the footage. And I can set everything up. So it's kind of nice in the morning. I can wake up and just kind of check through my shoots while I have my coffee on my couch, at least for the ATLI camera shoots, and that's pretty nice. And you know, it's got a fairly robust scheduling system too, which is nice. So you can set up like blackout periods, and you can come up with some pretty good schedules in order to make sure you're only catching the action when you actually want to be catching it. Because if the thing's coming on at night, waking up, taking an image, and there's nothing there, and exposes for 3 or 4 seconds, I mean, this is all energy that's being taken out of the battery. So I get why they use an app, and they actually do a fairly good job with the app on it. I have not had a lot of problems, but they also do make it very easy to name the cameras. That's super handy, dude, because I'm changing their names all the time. I got 4 that are up in the little studio up there, and I'll change the name of the camera on there to reflect what it's currently shooting in order to just help keep that stuff and, you know, keep track of it myself, because I got a lot of cameras shooting a lot of things at any given time. Aside from that, you have this the regular basic stuff. You know, you have you can do is take a snapshot. You can do an actual video, 1080p video if you want. And it also has some of these like kind of time-lapse dummy modes, right? So you just push flower if you want it to film a flower, sunrise, sunset if you want to do sunrise, sunset. Generally, I sit in manual because I don't want anything that's changing to potentially alter the metering and adjust the how it's going to capture the image at all. So I'll normally just set everything, hard set the white balance, ISO, you know, shutter speed and all that. So it does have an app. Apps suck, but you know, you kind of need it for this, and this one actually does do a good job of kind of helping my workflow and keeping everything kind of together, if that makes sense, because I can kind of control all of them through like one master control station. If we're not here, where this is connected to my wireless network, then it'll put out its own wireless network, and I connect directly to that wireless network, and then I can log into the camera and do all the things that I need to do. But yeah. Apps suck. What are you going to do? And one more feature that I hadn't covered yet is this actually does have the ability to film in IR. So I played around with that a little bit, but not a whole lot. I mean, it comes out, gives you like these really big pink trees and neat skies and stuff. But I haven't had a whole lot of time to play with it. You can also get an IR cut filter that will fit. I believe you go with a 49 millimeter, you can actually cram it in here and it fits and replaces the little UV filter up here. So you can do IR photography and time lapse with it. I definitely think it's worth giving a shot, and it's kind of fun. Oh, and there's one other thing called the time slice feature. I haven't really messed with it much, but here's a couple examples from it. Basically, what it does is it'll take samples from along the time lapse, and then it will establish kind of like a bar of that image one after another in order to do this kind of time slice thing. So it's kind of neat. I'm not too big into it, but that is something that can do. Also worth mentioning. So like I said, I've got 11 of these cameras, and there's just a lot of things that you can do with them, and I find them to be incredibly useful, and that's why I have so many. One of the things that I'll tend to do when I first start trying to film a new plant is I will just do kind of a very basic filming of it, just to kind of see how it behaves and see how is this thing going to move, what's the growth rate, what kind of intervals do I need to go with, and stuff like that. And what this does is this allows me to do that, and I don't have to tie up one of my robots that's filming really cool stuff to just be doing that exploratory shoot. So these things are fantastic for that. Another one of my favorite uses right now is up in my workshop. I got those little bays set up, and I got one camera in each. We have 4 right now, and I'm going to be building another 4 here probably in the next week or two. And I can just crank stuff in there. I can go super long term with stuff. Like I want to film some cactuses swelling, see if I can get some cactuses growing. I can take a couple of those and even put them off and dedicate them to a shoot that's going to last like 2 or 3 years. That's no problem. So I don't have to tie up, my big robots and stuff in order to do that. And then, you might find that when I'm filming something that takes like 2 or 3 months, that there might be something that happens that's really kind of interesting that's hard to catch. And then if I know it's there, then I can try and do that with my larger rigs with the larger cameras. So there's a lot of things that I like about these, and there's a couple areas where I wish it was a little bit better. The 1080p thing is kind of a bummer because there's so much cool aspects about this camera. It can do so many neat things. But the 1080p still looks fairly good. It's good for social media. It's good for posting online. I don't know if that will quite be to the point where you would use it with on some kind of like a high-level documentary, of course. However, you got to consider the price point. This is a $200 camera, and it's just with the price alone and the other abilities that it have just make me look right past the fact it's only 1080p. And as you can see, I can still get some really good footage with this. Other than that, I mean, I really like these things. The rubber kite case works very well for weather sealing. They're reliable. They're dependent. They've worked quite well for me, and I use them on all kinds of things constantly. So the question is, what about you? Is this something that you'd be interested in? Well, just keep in mind, this is probably not something that you would use where the footage would be used on a professional level. However, you can absolutely find ways to professionally use these and bring these in with your workflow depending on what you do. For me, I use these things for work quite often now at this point. Even if it's footage that'll never be aired, just in order to study plants and see how they behave, and it maximize my chances of success when I'm filming things. So at the end of the day, I absolutely love these. I'm probably going to get some more of them. And anybody that wants to check it out, I'll put the link to where you can buy it. You can just go to Amazon and get it. I give you an affiliate link, but I don't have an affiliate link, so I'm not getting paid for any of this. It's just these things, I've completely fallen in love with these things. I'm using them all the time, and I just kind of wanted to put a review out and just show that, they're actually fairly good cameras. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. We're going to have more content like this coming out, reviews and stuff like that. If you liked it, make sure you hit the subscribe button and like and all that kind of mamma jamma. And until then, thanks for tuning in, and hope this was useful. Bye.